Our final speaker this morning is Dr. Vinod Raina. He has his basic training in physics and later branched out to dedicate himself for grassroots work in the field of education as a communicator, as a writer, and a perceptive commentator on alternative development. And so I invite you to take the play.
Thank you, Charles. It's a privilege, though I'm a bit intimidated by this privilege to be speaking here with so many of my countrymen and women who are far more distinguished in this area than me. I can see Waterman, Rajinder Singh, Asghar Ali, Kartikeya, Sharda Jain, Lalit Pandey, Dunu Roy, Sandeep Pandey. I mean, the galaxy of people here. So what should I say to all of you and to myself? Provocatively, we had the Earth Charter and the idea of ESD for nearly 2 decades. I think we are still grappling with its content and pedagogy, which is not to undermine the wonderful work being done by many people, but I don't think we still understand what should be the content and pedagogy for a truly good ESD in this country and other parts of the world. Why is that so? Because we are overburdened with the pedagogy of the Enlightenment. The prevailing educational pedagogy flows out of Enlightenment from rationalism, from science, which in educational terms we call behaviorism. Teach children. We know better, teach them. Our books know better, teach them. This is the predominant pedagogy we have. And I would like to say that this is completely unsuitable if we really want ESD with ethical and moral values in it. Why has this happened? Because we're living under a philosophy which I would trace to Descartes, that mind and emotions are separate, and the mind should be stimulated by education, and therefore our education must be cognitive and not effective. And it is effective where values lie, where morals and ethics lie. That has been divested out of our education system. Finally, what are we confronted by when we talk about an ethical, moral ESD? We are confronted by a philosophical thought which we call utilitarianism and trace to Bentham and Mills, who asked the question, what should the governments do? They also gave the answer, the government should increase the happiness of people. And it was left to classical economists like Adam Smith and Ricardo to say, how can utilitarianism be brought into economics? And they said it can be through the market. So governments can increase the happiness of people through an economy which is based on market, the invisible hand of market, and we're living under that. And I contend that we cannot have a ESD if we're confronted with this economist view, which we also teach our children, to add to the confusion that James is talking about. In one classroom, we will tell about ESD. In the economy classroom, we will tell them about utilitarianism. Now, I believe that much before the Earth Charter and the ESD 2 decades ago, some of the thinking and answers actually came from this land. When Gandhi in 1937 asked the question, what kind of education should we have in India? He asked the question based on principles of needs and greeds and locusts swarming the earth and will exhaust the earth. But he didn't end up by giving just these statements. He had a group working out a structure for that education, which we in India call Nai Talim. And Zakir Husain's committee worked out what should be the content and pedagogy of that. And since 1942, the Vardha scheme of Nai Talim, new education, has lived with us in India. What was pedagogically different? What was different is that Gandhi said education must be based on the integration of the head, heart, and hand. So he brought values, he brought production to the cognitive aspects of education, which is what I started with saying, that our education is based on the pedagogy of cognition, Descartesian rationality. It was Gandhi who started doing that. It is we in India who decided that we will not adopt that. And to my mind, Since 92, what we are talking about and the kind of education we are seeking is very closely to Nai Talim. It has, of course, there are more additions to it, which could be for us yardsticks of making what we are grappling to discover. And today, if we were to ask the question, which the utilitarian asked, what should governments do and increase happiness? I think the question that we need to ask today is, how can people and the earth both live happily? Not just people live happily. Is there a way that people and earth can live happily? Or does the happiness of people have to be at the expense of the earth? Now this question has been asked. Very bright people have asked this question and said, is there a way to formulate an education which can do this? And I believe in that path. One of the most path-breaking work happened in Canada in mid-90s after the Earth Charter was written, but not very well known, when two young, bright Canadians, Rees and Vakramangal, worked out the ecological footprint. How much of food, water, things we pollute with, carbon emissions, can we ascribe to each human being on this earth in a manner that the people can live and the earth can be sustainable in terms of its regenerative capacity? And they worked out a figure. It's 1.8 global hectares per person if we take 6.7 billion people to be the population of the earth. And it will still leave something for the animals. So we have 1.8 billion global hectares per person available. And what is good news is that many people on this earth live with less than 1.8 global hectares, but we call them backward. We call them Adivasis. We call them poor. Now, they are the people who, with their lifestyles, are saving us. And the ones who use all that the rational optimist wants to use are forward, are modern, are better, are educated. And we need to think about that very, very seriously. Now, if the earth and the people can have to live together happily, is there a way we can construct an education which tells us how can each one of us live within 1.8 global hectares? Yes. There is a way to create an education and pedagogy to teach that exactly. Now, some friends at the New Economic Foundation called it the Happy Planet Index, an index in which the planet and the people can live both happily. And incidentally, United States comes at 150 on that index, which is nearly at the bottom. So it's a question of turning around and saying, are there other ways of looking at happiness rather than merely the utilitarian notion of governance increasing happiness? Now, combining this with the Nai Talim issues, what does it mean? To me, again provocatively, it doesn't mean talking only about environment. We won't go far in ESD if we talk only environment. It means talking about governance. How do we govern ourselves so that we can have this kind of meeting of happiness of the planet and earth? Our governance systems are not correct. This is what Gandhi said. He said, unless you combine local production with local governance with Nai Talim, you cannot have a new future. Therefore, ESD must be about governance systems which can bring in the kind of ESD which can combine the happiness of planet and earth. And it means local production. Again, going back to Gandhi, he said centralized production has inherent in it violence. And you cannot take that violence away, he told Nehru, through socialism. The only way to take away that violence is to shift from centralized production to local production of essentials of life. He even said that there will be railways and electricity which will not be local, but that's different. Essentials of life there. Now, I believe that in the ethical, moral being, fabric of what we're trying to discuss, we need to go beyond saying ESD is environmental education. We need to go beyond saying ESD is something we do, but economy must remain constant. And it will remain. That's the confusion we all have. And we must also believe that with 1.8 global hectares per person, we can live a very good lifestyle. Many of us are living that. It doesn't mean you cut out everything in life. So we don't have to listen to George Bush Sr., who went to 92, who didn't go to, refused to go there, saying, I'm not here to trade the lifestyles of the people of the United States. Now, I would like to tell Mr. George Bush and the people of the United States, at 1.8 global hectares, you can live a jolly good lifestyle. And therefore, the question is, Do you want to go down to that kind of education? And finally, I would agree with James. Why are we putting children as the problem? I think we are the problem. We are exhausting this world for them, and we're telling them, please learn how to live sustainably. We need to tell ourselves, how do we leave a future for them? Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you ever so much.